thank you very much. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Linda, for inviting me down. I am thrilled to be here to find out there are a lot of Democrats in Knox County. And there's a lot of reasons why I'm excited to be here, one of which is I got to see Dr. Renee Kessler speak. She was great. Well, look, I really appreciate the chance to be with you. I thought I'd start with a quick story. So my wife and I, we have a son who's 4.5. His name is True. So I'm like a little paleontologist in my house for anybody who's ever had a 4.5-year-old. Dinosaurs all the time. The other day, she had this conversation with him. I thought it was a good place to start. They were driving down the road, True's in the back seat, and he asked her, he says, Mommy, is Barack Obama still president? And she's like, well, no, there's a new president now. His name's Donald Trump. So True thinks about that for a second. And he says, is he doing a good job? She's like, no, he's not doing a good job. And then he thinks about that for a second, and he's a really sweet little boy. So True asked, he said, have you and Daddy told him? And my wife was able to very honestly tell our son, don't worry, your daddy tells him almost every day. And I do, but I'm going to take a little bit of a break, mostly from doing that tonight, because I think that while we obviously have criticisms of a Republican Congress, criticisms of this White House, that's not a hard thing to come up with. We also, as Democrats, have to be able to talk about what it is that we want to do, what it is we're for, what our vision is for the country. And that's where I want to focus for a little bit tonight. Really, I think the reason that I'm invited, I've been to 34 states so far since President Trump took office, many of them like this one more than once. And I think the reason I get invited is, more often than not, to share with y'all how I've had success as a progressive in a red state, right? I mean, as I came in the door, a lot of people stopped me and everybody wanted to tell me which part of Tennessee they're from, or which part of the county they're from, and how red it is. Like this, it's this red, right? So I understand, that, and I'm happy to do that. And so I came to share with you what I've learned as a progressive from a red state. And the biggest thing that I've learned more than anything else is that as Democrats, what we have to do is we have to have the courage to make our argument, and we have to make it to everybody. Period. That's it. That's what it's all about. And I tell you that from my experience. I've run statewide twice in Missouri. And the first time I won, we elect our Secretary of State statewide, so I won the Secretary of State's race on the same day that President Obama lost my state by almost 10 points. And then the second time, it was 2016, I got 220,000 votes from folks who also voted for President Trump. I outperformed the top of the ticket by 16 points. And I came here really to tell you that I did all of that, and I didn't do it by pretending to be a conservative Democrat. Everybody in my state knew that I was a progressive, but they also knew that I was telling them what I truly believed. And that's the thing about politics that really nobody ever talks about. For anybody, I know there's a lot of folks in college here, there's a lot of maybe political science majors, so you spend your time and you're in a classroom and it feels like they're trying to crack the code. Right? You get a lot of questions about cracking the code. I can see some heads nodding. There's no code to crack. It's you go out and you make your argument. You make it with courage and you make it to everybody. Because the thing that voters are looking for is they want to know that you really believe what you're saying. They want to know that you believe it because you care about them. That's it. And if that's the case, they will forgive you for believing something that they don't believe. As long as they know that you truly believe what you're saying and you believe it because you care about them. That is what I've learned. I'll tell you a quick story where I first learned that. So first race I ran was for the state legislature. I represented for 4 years Kansas City in the Missouri State House of Representatives. When I was first running, I was out there knocking on doors, and I hadn't been doing it very long. First few days, one of the very first doors I knocked on. I knock on this guy's door, and I'm still kind of, at this point, nervous whenever I can hear the footsteps of somebody coming down the stairs, right? Because it's like, okay, here we go, you get the adrenaline. And that went away after a while, but at the beginning it was there. And so this fellow comes to the door, and we start talking, and I kind of do my little spiel, and then I ask him, I say, is there a particular issue that you care about, the most you'd like to hear about? I actually, to this day, I don't remember now what the issue was that we talked about, but I remember that he brought something up, asked me a question about it, I gave him an answer, and as I was answering the question, I could tell from the look on his face that he was not digging my answer at all. It was not going well. Clearly, he did not agree. And again, I was new at this, so I started doing what I've seen politicians on TV do. I started trying to spin the guy and kind of tell him how really we agree and we have really the same belief. And that was making it worse, I could tell from the look on his face. And then he starts asking me more questions. The next thing I know, it's almost like we're in an argument. And I'm thinking, maybe I shouldn't be running for office at all. I don't seem to know how to do this, and panicking a little on the inside. And after a minute or two of this, I finally just say, just sort of out of desperation, I just say, it seems like we don't agree, but now you know where I stand, and I really appreciate your time. And I turn around to walk to the next house. And right then, he stops me and he says, yeah, that's fair. I'll vote for you. And then he says, and you can put a sign in my yard if you want. And so from that moment forward, I became addicted to having an honest conversation with voters. It's when I realized that, he wasn't necessarily he wasn't going to go to my website and check every single position out. He was probably not even going to read the other side of the flyer that I handed him. He had made a judgment about whether he trusted me and about whether I was going to be honest with him. That's what he was interested in. And that's what most voters are really interested in. Most voters, what they're looking for more than anything else is the simple, everyday courage for you to say what you truly believe. When you think about what we see in Washington right now, and what we are most disappointed in, and when I say we, I don't just mean Democrats. We as a country, what we're most disappointed in right now, it is the lack of that simple, everyday courage just to do what you already know is right. That's really the secret to adulthood, isn't it? That really 99% of the time you know exactly what the right thing is to do. But we act like, oh no, half the time it's a real tough decision. No, you're just deciding whether or not you're going to do the right thing. And that's what we see in Washington all the time. I'll give you a couple of examples. I know that I said I was not going to talk about President Trump, but there's two very good examples. So I'm going to bring them up. And it all goes to my basic thesis here that right now our biggest problem in Washington is that we just have too many people for whom the toughest thing they've ever been through in their entire lives was the campaign that got them there in the first place. I think that includes the President of the United States right now. So this is a piece of news that has slipped through the cracks. It's a few months old, it's been ongoing, but you may or may not have heard it. That President Trump has decided that unlike most presidents, all presidents, unlike the role of commander-in-chief, he has decided that the decision about how many troops to send to a place like Afghanistan and when to send them, that he's going to delegate decisions like that to the Pentagon. He's not going to make those decisions as commander-in-chief. Now, you've seen him in cases like with Ryan Owens, the Navy SEAL who was lost in Yemen, say things like the generals lost Owens. You have seen him refuse to take responsibility when things don't go the way that he wanted them to go, and then when they do go well, immediately take credit for it. We've seen that. It's consistent. He's decided that he's not going to be the one as commander-in-chief to make the decision about whether or not to send people into harm's way. That is, to me, the very definition of refusing to have the courage to just do the job that you asked for in the first place. And the Pentagon is considering sending, thousands of American soldiers right now to Afghanistan. That is thousands of Americans who are willing to follow, who have the courage to follow that order and deserve a commander-in-chief with the courage to give that order in the first place. And call me crazy, but I have this other minimum standard for people who would lead this country, and that is that they should have the courage to stand up to Nazis and the KKK. It's a nice low bar to jump over. So that's what we're disappointed in more than anything. It's just that lack of courage to put your country first and to do what you already know is right. And so we can talk about that as Democrats, and we should talk about that. But we also, in addition to having the courage to make our argument to everybody, just like I did on that guy's front porch several years ago, we also got to have the courage to make our argument. In addition to having the courage to make our argument, we got to have the courage to make our argument to everyone. And I know that in a place where I walk out the door and everybody wants to tell me where the reddest parts of the county are, you know exactly what I mean. I'm of the belief that as a Democrat, The reason I'm a Democrat is because I believe that what we want to do as Democrats is the best thing for everybody. I don't think it's just the best thing for some people. I don't think, well, there's some voters, there's some Americans for whom our ideas aren't going to work out well. No, I'm a Democrat because I think that what we want to do is the best thing for every American, whether you are rich or poor, gay or straight, a man or a woman, black or white, whether you live in the city or the country, whatever. I believe that what we want to do is the best thing for everybody. Do you believe that it is the best thing for everybody? Okay. If we believe that, then we have no excuse for skipping anybody when we make our argument, ever. We should never do that again. We spent 7 years, for example, refusing, as a party, too many people in our party, refusing to defend Obamacare. Look, this is a law where a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress extended health care to millions of people, literally saved people's lives. And then, too many people in our party ran away from it, said they weren't going to defend it. And then we were shocked and surprised when it turned out it wasn't very popular after that. And then what happened? Then President Trump wins the election, you have Republicans in the White House, up and down in Congress, and a friend of mine likes to say, sometimes courage is just the lack of any other options. And what happened? Everybody started turning out to town halls and making an argument. Every Democrat in the country started making the argument for it. And a few months later, it was popular. And we were surprised all over again. I don't think we should ever be surprised by that again. I think that we should make our argument. And I think that our argument on this is very simple. We believe that health care should be treated as a right in this country. And it's just me talking, but I think that means single payer. That's what I think. So since I'm talking about making our argument to everybody, let me demonstrate how we would do that on single payer. This is not that outside what we've done in the past in this country. When you think about things like Social Security, where we decided that everybody in this country was going to have the right to retire with dignity. Public schools, we decided that everybody is going to have the right to get an education. Well, if that's the case, then shouldn't we also decide that, hey, we're going to go ahead and make sure that everybody in this country has the right to know that they're never going to die from a lack of health insurance? We should. It's no different. Another example of where I think we've got to make our argument and focus on how it affects everybody in their everyday lives is the issue of college affordability. There's some college students here raising their hands. All right, so let me do this. Whether you're in school or not, whether it's your loans or not, if your personal financial situation is affected by the student debt of somebody in your family, raise your hand. Keep them up. Everybody look around. There are, I don't want to point anybody out, there are a few people raising their hand who look like school may have been a few years ago. Okay? And that's my point. That's important. This is an issue that doesn't just affect the millennial generation. This is an issue that doesn't just affect people who are in school now or just coming out of school. And I'll go farther than that. The argument that we've got to make is that when you think about towns like this one, towns like the one I'm from, or the ones that surround our hometowns, these are places where all we really want across this country, my neighbors, your neighbors, we want our kids' lives to be an upgrade over our own lives. And if we can get that, we'd really like it if our kids can raise their kids where we raised them. We just want our families to be happy, healthy, safe, and nearby. And when your kids can't afford to come home, even when they want to, because the wages aren't high enough in your community and because their debt is too deep, then what that means is when we don't tackle an issue like college affordability, it's not just a question of whether or not kids across the country can afford college. It's a question of whether or not we're going to save small towns across the South and the Midwest and the West and frankly the entire nation. That's what that's about. I know that your community is just like mine and that's what you're worried about. My son is 4.5 years old and when I think about the day that he goes off to college, I think he's going to be surprised to find out that I'm going with him. All I want is to be near the kid. That's all we want. And I've met so many young people who what they really want is they want to be able to go home and contribute to the community that raised them in the first place, and they can't afford to go home. I believe that what the Democratic Party believes in, whether we're talking about health care, whether we're talking about criminal justice reform so that we give people the second chance to be a part of our society again and don't feel that they have you're talking about even college affordability, all of it is about making it so that people don't have to leave home in order to make it in this country, that they can stay in the community that raised them. That's what the Democratic Party is about. That's what all of our policies, everything that we believe in is about. And the thing is, we can't achieve that if folks don't have the right to vote. And you know that well here. I mean, there's a visual depiction behind me of the fact that the civil rights movement never really ended. That we're all truly a part of it still, and one of the ways that we're a part of it is we fight for the right to vote. So I was the chief election official and Secretary of State in Missouri for 4 years. Like this state, it's a state with a GOP supermajority in the legislature. And I got to see the voter suppression playbook, unfortunately, up close and personal. Here's how it works. Step one is they undermine faith in American democracy. Step two, they create obstacles to voting. Step three, they create obstacles to the obstacles. That's it. That's how it works. And they pretend that this is a policy difference between the parties. They pretend that this is like taxes or health care. That's not true. That's not what's going on here. This is a political strategy by the Republicans going on about 20 years now, and it is a political strategy no different than when they decide which channels to run their TV ads on or which doors to knock on. They do it because it helps them win elections, period. They have decided that there are folks who aren't going to vote for them because their policies negatively affect these people, minorities, young people, low-income folks, the disabled, women, the elderly. I'm probably forgetting a few, but they've decided rather than go out and try and win over those people by changing their approach, changing what they believe in and what they're pushing for, they're just going to eliminate those people from democracy. And it's wrong. And when the courts look at this, they use churched-up court-type terms like marginalizing minority voters. Folks, it's racist, is what it is. That's all it is. It's just racism. It's just racism. And they do it because it helps them win elections. So for years, what we did, voting rights advocates, also known often as Democrats, is took these cases to court. And we're still doing that. It's super important. But what happened when President Trump won the election is Jeff Sessions took over the Department of Justice and switched sides in these cases. Is there any lawyers here? If you're willing to. It's okay, I'm a recovering lawyer. Sorry. But so what happened is, for the lawyers or anybody who's been in court, imagine you're in court, you brought the case, and then halfway through your lawyer turns to you, picks up their stuff, and says, I'm with them now, walks to the other side. That's what's happened to voters in this country, is Jeff Sessions has switched sides. And when that's the case, it means that we can no longer just have a legal argument against this. That's still real important, but we have to expand the argument from the court of law out of it into the court of public opinion. And that's why, about a year ago, I started Let America Vote. So what Let America Vote does is we create political consequences for politicians who push voter suppression. Basically, if you are a politician in this country making it harder to vote, we are making it harder for you to get reelected. Year, we've knocked on a couple 100,000 doors, we've helped elect some folks across the country or in a few states, and then we decided this is working pretty well, let's go ahead and expand this to a few other places. So we are expanding to 5 states, and I'm excited to be able to stand here and tell you that this is one of them. This is a state where the Republicans decided several years ago that they were going to win elections by making sure that certain people couldn't vote. And our attitude on it, and if you're going to do it with us, I'm thrilled to have your back in it, is to say, look, to elected officials in this state, if you are going to come after our right to vote, we're going to come for your job. That's what we have to do. Now, this is all part of making our argument. I'm going to tell you a quick story about it. When I ran for Secretary of State in 2012, the biggest issue in the race was going to be photo ID, whether or not Missouri should adopt a photo ID requirement. Everybody knew that it was going to be the biggest issue in the race. So as I'm running, people who are advising me tell me, you know, these polls say that like over 75% of Missourians disagree with you and think that you should have to show your photo ID in order to vote. It would be real helpful if you could maybe change your position on this to match these polls. And I said, no, I wasn't going to do that. And to this day, I'm actually the only candidate for Secretary of State in a competitive race anywhere in the country in the general election to run a statewide ad about my opposition to photo ID. So I leaned right into it, told people exactly why I believe what I believe. And as I stood at the polls on election day, a lot of voters walked up to me, shook my hand, and as you would expect, a lot of them said, hey, you're wrong about photo ID. But a lot of those folks said, but you told me what you believe and why, and you're going to get my vote today. And on the same day that President Obama lost my state by almost 10 points, I won that race because I went out and I made my argument. We don't have to take this voter suppression stuff. We can stand up against it, and when we do, it will make an enormous difference. They do it because it helps them win elections. I promise you, when they figure out that it doesn't help them win elections and it helps them lose elections, they're going to quit doing it. Which is exactly why we got to do this. Now look, I mentioned that I've been to 34 states since President Trump took office. And one of the things that people ask me all the time is they say, this feels real. Is this real, this movement, this thing that's going on? I mean, there's a lot of people in here right now. Raise your hand if either you or somebody you know fits the description of got involved politically for the first time in the last year. Keep them up. Look around. All right, you can put them down. Do you think, if I had asked you that question in 2015 or 2016, do you think that many people would have been raising their hands? No. Something really special is happening in the country right now. It's important to remember that just because they're in power, that does not mean that they're winning the argument. They have the power, but we have the momentum. There is enormous energy out there, like nothing I've seen in my lifetime, for sure. I have met so many people for whom it was January 20th, 2017 that got them into politics, and they haven't quit since. And the question is, what do we do with that? People get to a point where you can't ask them to call their member of Congress 6 days a week, right? You've got to make sure, all you candidates, you've got to make sure that you're giving them doors to knock on, you're giving them calls to make, because people are ready to do it for you. It's a mental health thing. People want to get up every day, just like I do, and fight for what we believe in, because it makes us, you know, somebody once said that it's very difficult to feel down and useful at the same time. And that's where all of us are. So this movement is exciting. You know, as it was pointed out, 54% of the country voted for somebody not named Donald Trump. So just because he may have won the election doesn't mean that he's winning the argument over who this country is or where we're going. That's not what's happening. It's exciting to be a part of it. But what's really exciting about it to me is that you're not here tonight, and you don't go to other events, you don't knock on doors, just because you want to beat the folks in the Republican jerseys. That's not why. Yeah, you want to win elections. But the truth is that the reason that you want to win these elections, the reason that you're here tonight, is because you see your country divided, and it hurts. We're all just here because we want to bring the country back together around some common ideals. That's why we're here. We know what that feels like. And I know that if you watch cable news or if you look at social media, what I just said can sound like a pie in the sky thing to say. The idea that we're not as far apart from each other as Americans as some people may make it seem. But I swear to you it's true. And so I want to end with a story in that vein to kind of make my point. When I was in Army Intelligence School, one of my instructors pulled me aside and he gave me some advice. He was giving me advice, one Jewish soldier to another. And he said, when you get over there, don't let your translator find out that you're Jewish, because they won't want to work with you. Well, I didn't know any better, so I took this advice, and I get to Afghanistan, and I am paired up with this guy named Salam. Now, Salam, as it turned out by pure coincidence, had family in Kansas City, where I'm from. And so, like me, considered Kansas City to be his hometown. And so just a couple of Kansas City guys going right out, me and Salam. We became really close. I never had a Muslim friend that I was as close to as I was to Salam. So I asked him all sorts of questions about Islam, and he answered all of them. And he never asked me about my religion, and they told me not to say anything, so I didn't tell him. And then a few days before I was getting ready to go back home, I really felt like I wanted to tell Salam that I was Jewish. And we'd become really close, been around some dangerous situations. So I wanted to tell him. And so we're sitting there having leftovers at his safe house, and I made kind of a big production of it, and I tell Salam that I'm Jewish. And he looks at me kind of funny, and he says, Jason, did you think I didn't know that? And I'm like, yeah, man, I never told you. And he said, back home in Kansas City, my sister cuts your grandmother's hair. So we had a good laugh about that, but then he looked a little more serious. He looked a little offended, maybe, and he looked at me and he asked me, he said, did you think I would care? And, you know, I was embarrassed, but I told him the story from intelligence school. And then Salam said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, Jason, over here, we are just a couple of Americans who the bad guys would very much like to kill. So look, I say let the other side be the party that wants to divide and push people apart. We can be a unifying force, because we have the truth on our side. We have the wind at our back. And if we all work together, we're going to save the American dream from the nightmare that is Donald Trump. Thank you for everything.